All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Shared Stakes. I'm Gunjin, and I'm also here with Thomas.
Hey.
And today we are joined by Jakub from the Symmetrical for our second episode of Shared Stakes, where we uncover the secrets of the community building. Welcome, Jakub.
Hello, everyone, and glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. So let's just start off with, tell us about you and how you got into the Web3 space.
Yeah, so I'm actually a biochemist by education. I studied biochemistry in London. I thought this is going to be my dream. Before that, I was doing my A-levels. I did biology, chemistry, and maths. And I was like, okay, I'll be super excited. And probably about 6 months into my first year, I was like, oh my God, this is not for me. I decided to just push through because I know so many people that have succeeded in life and they've studied something completely different than what they ended up doing. And I decided to finish it off, graduated, and then I felt like I don't really have a place in the world. I was always drawn to investments, but I don't have the sort of typical finance background that could help me break into the world of investments. I decided just to casually take up a job at a health tech startup. Thought that a startup environment will be much more exciting than academia and sitting in a lab. I think it was an all right job, but at the same time, I started talking to my friends about crypto and about NFTs. NFTs are booming. I remember sitting with my friend having dinner, and he's like, "Oh yeah, there's these Bored Apes that are minting. I think it was not quite not a ETH." And I was like, "No, this is ridiculous. I'm definitely not going to pay that much for a picture." Fast forward a couple of months, I really got hooked on the space, started buying my own NFTs. Unfortunately, I did pass on the apes. And at some point I realized that, crypto, I'm having much more pleasure out of this. And it's starting to get hard to have this sort of crypto degen life and a full-time job. And sort of the peak bullish times of, late 2021 is when I decided to quit and go into crypto full time. I was actually reading articles of how to stay in the space, because my first investments into crypto were actually around 2018, but I kind of forgot about the space. I was a total tourist. It was just at the peak when I bought Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin for some bizarre reason. And sort of seeing what has been happening with the NFT space, I promised to myself, if I'm taking this seriously now, I'm not going to be a tourist. I'm going to stay here for a long time. One of the first things that I've done was I actually started reading a bunch of articles of how to stay in the space and how to find a job here. One of the things that was sort of mentioned is join a DAO. And at that time, my co-founder, she was starting a DAO called the Symmetrical. So I was thinking that I'll be playing around with NFTs and this will be kind of my safety net, that I'm already contributing to this DAO. But it turned out to become this full-time job. So yeah, we started the Symmetrical.
So we love to ask, since we are called lore, what is the lore or the origin story of the Symmetrical?
Good question. So I think really the origin story there was that my co-founder at that time, she wanted to purchase a World of Women NFT, and she didn't have enough money. She decided to start a DAO. Let's pull capital together and have a much larger purchasing power. That was really the origin story. And what happened after is so many iterations and tests that we've done. We sort of started as an investment club and then went on to giving grants to projects. I started producing a bunch of content, actually finally finding some sponsors for that. We've been experimenting a lot.
So after a couple of months of experimenting, what would you guys say your mission is at the Symmetrical?
Yeah. We've spent a lot of time on establishing what the mission of the Symmetrical is. I think Seed Club was a good start, where they kind of emphasized the importance of having a strong mission. At that time, we were all about, during our demo day pitch, we're here to establish a dominant position of Gen Z in Web3 because late stage capitalism has fucked us over. And that was a very strong statement. Some people loved it and some people hated it. That's kind of what we had after Seed Club. Right now, we took a step back and started to think what is something broad enough to reflect all of the various activities that we do. Right now, what we're sitting at is empowering Gen Z and Web3 through multiple things.
Yeah, I can totally relate with the concept of like defining a mission. I think for the founder in their head, you always have this like end world that you're trying to get to. And that end world and how you get there doesn't really change that much, but you need to communicate it in 100 different ways as the market evolves, as your team evolves, and as everything just changes, right? That is one of the biggest challenges of foundership in general. How is kind of the process of what you're executing kind of changed over time too? What is the Symmetrical focused on today to get to that end mission?
I totally agree with the statement. The actions that you make have to be dressed up in words that a lot of people can get behind. This sort of the call to action. Empowering Gen Z in Web3 is this sort of perfect umbrella term for a lot of things. As we started as an investment club, pulled capital together and started like buying chain assets, then we launched grants program because there's a lot of our community members are passionate about investing. And at that time, we actually managed to get into Disco's seed round. That was an aha moment for us that as a community, we were very attractive to founders. And we were thinking like, could we possibly try and raise a small fund or a small venture DAO and start investing as like these Gen Z young investors? You know, we received a lot of good feedback. We've actually spoken to some of your investors. I think the most impactful feedback was from Peter Pan at 1KX. I, at that time, didn't really have much of a network. So I was cold DMing these people. Like I was cold DMing Rachel, cold DMing Peter Pan. Some of them decided to take the calls with me. And what he suggested is like, that it's a very good angle, but you need to start creating more of a track record for yourself to actually be able to be in that position of launching a venture DAO. And that's why you raise the grants program. How we empower Gen Zs, like through different activities that we do. We still do investments. We still actually distribute grants focused solely on Web3 Social, which is like such a huge thing for us these days. Aside of that, we've been working on a cool series with LDF about like, where's the money in the creator economy, where we're trying to establish whether it's economically feasible. We try to give as many opportunities to our community as we can. So like we're writing a report with a large DeFi player on like how Gen Z uses DeFi. We have a partnership with a large infrastructure player around video transcoding, and we're helping them with deal flow. So all of these blocks add up to us giving Gen Z opportunities in the space. And like anyone within the Symmetrical is welcome to join, also participate in the upside, because a lot of the work that we do, there's some financial incentive there as well. We've done consulting jobs as well for Glass Protocol, for Station. They all build up to empowering Gen Z.
So you mentioned that you've chosen this like niche vertical of Gen Z. Do you screen members up front to ensure that they are actually Gen Z, or is anyone allowed to join?
That's a good one. So at first, we were very strict on, are you Gen Z? Like asked everybody for their age, etc. I no longer think that like being Gen Z is necessarily the case that you have to be of a specific age. It's more about your mentality. I wouldn't say we would probably welcome someone that's like, say 50 or 60, because it's completely different generations, unless they exceptionally know that internet culture that we've been brought up with. There's some leniency. There's a lot of terms. We've actually dug into what are the specific age gaps for Gen Z. There's a few ways of looking at it. We try to find people that have a young spirit, and I'd say 95% of the community passes the age requirements, and there's a couple of members that are just young people at soul.
You just have to identify as Gen Z, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Question for you. So you're trying to create opportunity for Gen Z in the space, and you're trying to create opportunities for them, perhaps in the Web3 social space, and let them invest in Web3 social, creator economy, things like that. Why get Symmetrical involved in your cap table or your product process? What is Gen Z really bringing to the table there?
All of us were born with a smartphone, or at a very young age, we already had a smartphone. We're like chronically online. The difference between a Gen Z crowd and perhaps older generations is that we're great product testers. We've been doing a bunch of beta testing for various projects. We understand the internet culture. We're good people to have as users and also on your side, because we know how to make a noise on the internet.
One of your core focuses, I believe, is marketing, right? Gen Z marketing in particular, and how that differs. And I know there's a lot of short form and TikTok and all of this is emerging. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
we had some marketing jobs with a few projects that we've consulted. The underlying thing for Gen Z and how has marketing changed. And we can even look at, current fashion marketing, how much this has changed from, the ideal of a person's tone and fit and slim. And I think Gen Z is all about honesty. That kind of the approach here is just to be very transparent and be honest with things. That's kind of how we differ. We've played around with things like, at some point we were like writing everything without punctuation and only like no capital letters and things like that. This is like a slightly younger subset of Gen Z that still that does that. Not necessarily the type of community members that we have. We're kind of targeting the older range of Gen Z that are already serious enough to actually get some work done.
I saw one of your Twitter posts about how you are taking the stance that you think Web3 consumer adoption will come from video. Do you mind expanding on that concept?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually a partnership that we have with LifePeer. That's one of the opportunities that we have opened up to our community. And the way we think of this is 80% of internet's bandwidth right now is video. And within Web3, we're still lacking good video apps with a great user experience. We're way behind TikTok, YouTube, etc. This is the most digestible and easiest content to consume for people. That's why we think that's where the sort of the large unlock came, when we finally have some good mobile apps, for example, where you can view the content, and when the content abundance is going to be sufficient. Right now, it's just a huge disparity between what you see and the amounts of content you can find on YouTube versus, for example, on LensTube.
I don't know if you listened to the All In pod, but they were talking about how Threads is very different from Twitter in the sense that Twitter is a lot of text, which can be parsed by AI and fed to large language models, versus Threads and Instagram, which are image and video focused, may not. Any thoughts on that? Just AI, the future?
I'm super pro AI. I think of this as like an essential tool for my work. It has shortened down a bunch of like random things that I have to do, whether it's being like summarizing. I'm a person that has a reasonably chaotic mind, and sometimes like getting continuous text is a struggle. It takes you way too much time. And now with ChatGPT, whenever I want to like write an announcement to the community or write an email to someone, I just write bullet points of like the things that I want to get down and then turn it into this pretty continuous text. To one more note on like Threads versus Twitter, it's like completely different social graphs. I think of Twitter as my place of work, of like interacting with people that I'm collaborating with, working with. And my Instagram is just like pictures of food and traveling whenever I have the time to do so. For me, it's not the best overlap. Perhaps people that are using Twitter for more like entertainment, that would make sense. These are still very separate groups of people. And the things that I post on Twitter, I would never post on Instagram because my friends would think crazy, like I'm just constantly talking about crypto.
You'll notice that no one's posting about NFTs or DAOs on Threads because you'll just get laughed out of the room by all your IRL friends, right? Kind of circling back to the different marketing channels to kind of focus on, right? You're building a Web3 community, and it sounds like video is pretty important for you. Within video, there's short form video, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram. There's live streaming, Twitch, HypeShot, whatever Web3 native platform like LivePeer. And then there's YouTube, right? Just for long form video, not ephemeral, right? Between those channels, let's start with the content format. Which of those content formats do you think are kind of like the best ones to invest in? And then we spoke a little bit about like the Web3 platforms that could be interesting. Maybe let's just focus on the Web3 platforms that you would want to distill that content through.
So for us, I think it's a mix of both long and short content. For long form content, that's when we do educational videos. So for example, Where's the Money in the Creator Economy is a good showcase for when we are trying to get specific messages across around like, what is Web3 Social? How does it work to be a Web3 native content creator? What are the apps there? And that's something that won't necessarily work in short form. And sort of my thought around giving wisdom to people in short form is kind of like scams, like how to make $1 million just using AI. That's the kind of content that I see on TikTok that is like short form. It's like this magic pill that you get, and like in 10 seconds, they can tell you how to become a millionaire. Try to stay away from that. Some things require a lot more time to talk about. On the other hand, short form content is purely for our entertainment. The more entertaining stuff that is informative. So not necessarily educational, but one thing that has worked well for us in terms of short form content is these minute videos, which are product roasts. And I have roasted more as well. And these are perfect. You know, they're entertainment. I think it's like a win-win. It's both entertainment for people watching it, like us taking a stab at a project. But at the same time, this is like very informative for the projects that we roast. It's like, what do we actually like and don't like about the project? You know, we've had some incredible situations where we were pointing out the mistakes that founders are making, and like within a week or so, they've updated their app, they've improved, etc.
Yeah, that's like entertaining and educational, which is kind of hard to do in short form. That's a really good idea with roasting. You mentioned that on Twitter that you think we're in the Farmville era of Web3 social. Between like Farcaster, Lens, and all these other protocols that are coming up, could you describe what you mean by that?
I think we're on the brink of that era. I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I've been looking at the space from an investment perspective for quite a long time now. What we're starting to see finally is hyper casual gaming coming into social graphs. So a good example is something called Lens, where it's basically like a Flappy Bird and sort of an experiment for the team to build out something bigger. This is going to come to Web3 social. That's like a kind of the perfect ecosystem. So as we look at like on-chain games, like play to earn games, they are very much require you to be deeply immersed and spend a load of time there to play the game and like win at the game and actually be able to perhaps have some revenue from that. Not a lot of people have been thinking about the hyper casual gaming space, which is like so many more people play these little games like Candy Crush, etc. And they make a ton of sense when there's a social graph integrated, when you can see what your friends are doing. How, for example, are you performing, and can I overtake you in the rankings? And perhaps we could, integrate a token into that, and then suddenly start competing and being able to also have monetary incentives. That's one part of SocialFi is these casual games. And why I said Farmville is like, because like Zynga is like this gaming studio of the early Facebook era. And I'm sure a lot of us like played Farmville and all of these other games. And I think something very similar, but potentially better with also some financial incentives is going to happen in Web3 Social.
Zynga totally took advantage of the Facebook social graph to embed a game in there. And I see the parallels. I'm going to have to sort of steal this narrative from you. I think you're totally on point here that some of the on-chain games that are coming out that are very like 2D and strategy focused, because those are the kind of games that you could put on chain, and it makes sense to put on chain and have a transaction kind of ascribed to some sort of strategic move. So it would make sense that there is going to be this intersection. Ethereum itself is like this content API and a social graph in a sense, right? And same with everything that's going on Polygon, and Lens is really taking advantage of that. Combining that with this intersection of on-chain games makes a lot of sense to me. They say history kind of doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And I could totally see that happening. So we dove like right into Web3 Social and this specific sort of use case, right? And emergent trend. I would love to kind of step back and get a sense of what you define as Web3 Social and your kind of breakdown of the landscape and how you're seeing these different categories evolve.
That's a good question, because we're actually sort of working on a brand new opportunity that I'm happy to talk to you about more later on. The way I see the space right now is that, first of all, there's these social graph providers. And these are things such as Lens, DSO, Farcaster, CyberConnect. All of them kind of provide the infrastructure for developers to be able to build out applications. And the upside here for all of these builders is that you can suddenly like plug into a social graph that has like 100,000 users already. In terms of like the cold start problem, you have a bunch of people that are already onboarded. All they have to do is download the app. They don't have to fill out any details. They already have an identity built up within that social graph. The way we look at it right now is that there's these sort of protocols and the infrastructure, then things that we're particularly excited about. And the way we see it is, these social graphs, incredibly well funded. The app layer and the middleware layer is where actually funding is much shorter, but these social graphs will not have much sort of a value without a thriving app ecosystem. So things within the app layer, things such as mobile apps and front ends, so things such as Orb, Favor, Yellow, we're looking at anything related to like content consumption, like live streaming stuff, podcasting, where we're looking at also projects like the hyper casual gaming and I think socialifying. And that's something that we've been thinking a lot about lately is the fact that like Web3 Social as it is a bunch of like clones mostly. It's like an Instagram clone and a Twitter clone and a Reddit clone. But I don't think many people will come to Web3 Social to have a very similar experience, but with a much smaller group of people that can actually reply and interact with you. I think they have a place in this ecosystem, but what I'm particularly excited on the app there is like these novel Web3 social experiences. And we've given a lot of thought to that. And what crypto does well is transactions. So combining transactions with social experiences is where we're super excited. There's going to be a lot of innovation here. So things such as hyper casual gaming if you can like play people and win tokens, things such as Steel Cap or Party DAO. I think these are kind of the early innings where we have these cool coordination games where finance is also embedded into this. And and I think that's going to be the killer use case. That's why normies will be actually, I don't like the word normies. That's why when people that aren't Web3 native are going to actually come and like use a Web3 application is because this delivers an experience that they couldn't have had before in Web2.
Just going to say, you don't think people will come for the ethos of decentralization? No, I'm just joking. I feel like spot on.
I agree. I think some people will, but there isn't enough of them. If we want to reach that critical mass, it has to be something brand new. But another part of things that we're looking at is middleware. So it's protocols, it's application layer and middleware. So things such as analytics, we're looking at like novel marketing tools. Like in Web3 Social, because we own our identities finally, we're going to have the possibility to actually have an upside in by being targeted by ads. So if you have a lot of followers and you open yourself up to see a specific advert, you should have an ups to that. And I think one project called Waves that recently rebranded to Zerf, we've given them a grant, and what they allow you to do is embed a microtransaction into a post on Lens, and you can sort of choose. Let's say I set it up as anyone that has about 300 followers and mirrors this post, they'll get one magic for me. That's how you can have an upside just by amplifying posts, by kind of, being a curator, in a sense. So that's the other thing that we're looking at. But lastly, one thing that I'm super excited about is that we'll finally be able to have full control over the feed that we see. Like, for example, the way Lens is structured is you've got algorithms and there's going to be huge marketplaces for these algorithms. And we're talking to a couple of projects that allow you to, for example, deploy algos as contracts. But like, think about the use cases here. So first of all, I think marketplaces of like DAOs selling to their DAO members, their algos to see like more of DAO related stuff, more of their community. Then secondly, I think crypto traders will be selling their algos to spot the next coin, etc. I've actually spoken to a founder of a large centralized exchange today, and he told me when I was telling him about the ideas, like he's already got a crypto trader who's trying to like figure this out with him and sort of share revenue from selling an algorithm. But on the more high level note, we are going into a censorship resistant social network. And if we want to have traditional brands coming in that care about their PR, we need to have any form of like moderation to guarantee that, let's say, Coca-Cola advert is not going to be displayed next to hate speech. And I think algorithms are truly our best bet here.
Choose your own algorithm. That's where we're headed.
This is going to be the case. I think there's going to be fierce competition around just having the best algorithms for people to see the most enjoyable content as well. There's going to be probably startups that focus solely on the algorithms.
Super cool. And then circling back, I totally agree with how we need to build unique social experiences that are uniquely enabled by crypto to onboard people into crypto. So these Twitter clones, Instagram clones, I don't think they're necessarily going to work. But we think that you're totally right, that linking transactions and social experiences is going to be kind of it. And this really inspired like how we evolved from Prism to Lore. So we actually used to also be effectively like a Twitter, but for tracking what your friends are doing on chain. But then we quickly learned that, this was back in 2021. As soon as Twitter like started incorporating some NFT PFP features, that it was going to be just a matter of time before some sort of Web2 social network that just has a much bigger social graph would keep incorporating some sort of like crypto features. And it would be tough for any sort of, clone that just is just like making content from transactions to really have longevity. And we realized that people are actually trying to co-own assets together on the platform. And that was like a really unique behavior where people from all over the world without traditional financial rails were trying to do that. And we really leaned into that. So totally agree with you there. You also wanted to talk about this new product, let's call it, that the Symmetrical is launching. It's a Web3 social investment DAO, very much parlaying off the discussion we just had. You can share with the world here first. I don't know if we're hearing it first, but what that's all about. We're super excited.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you've already learned about the history of the Symmetrical and like the things we've done to finally get into this position, we've got really involved with Web3 social space by testing products, by roasting them, by producing content and actually using these applications. And what we saw is that precisely social graphs have a lot of funding, and now the application and middleware layer are incredibly underfunded. And what we decided to do is actually launch an investment DAO that focuses on the app and middleware layer. So we're social graph agnostic. We actually have a bunch of social graph participating in the investment DAO, but actually being contrarian in a moment where every investor is like very conservative with their checks, because the way we feel about it is that right now, the founders that we have that haven't sort of raised huge rounds in the past during the bull market, these are the most relentless people building net new things. And we want to start supporting them. So we're launching Social Graph Ventures. It's going to be an investment DAO, currently sort of in the fundraising process, with a huge help from Hydra Ventures, which is an investment DAO structured as a fund of funds. We are targeting to deploy about 50 investments into the app and middleware layer. We've already actually deployed an angel check into Orb that will be warehoused as first deal of Social Graph Ventures.
It always surprises me how uncontrarian a lot of venture capital is. There's this constant cycle of whenever the bull market kind of evaporates, that VCs just start funding like infra startups again, right? But then as a consumer-led, consumer-focused company, we feel that we end up building up a lot of the infra to actually make our consumer experience possible. So I'm not really even sure, who's really using a lot of these Web3 infra startups, maybe just like developers as they're getting started. I think that makes a lot of sense. But consumer experiences are really what brings the next billion users into crypto, right? And we already saw it with OpenSea and Uniswap. Yes, like they had to build a lot of infra to make that experience possible. And that's just the state of where the industry is at. But like ultimately, you need to own the customer relationship, right? And I think it's very true of you to be countercyclical to what the VCs are thinking right now, and be early to invest in those consumer startups. And trust me, in 6 months, they're all going to jump on your bandwagon.
Yeah, I think, a lot of intelligent VCs and investors in the space have already sort of decided to get involved here. I think we all see that the next major catalyst is going to be Web3 Social for many reasons. One of them is that, how many people understand DeFi versus how many people understand social networks? And it's like it grabs the mind of a much larger population. And the other thing is that we think that Web3 Social will sort of rejuvenate a lot of spaces. I think a lot of things are very much single player. And yes, you can go into Etherscan or even use Zapper interface to see what is your friend doing on chain. But this is still a very fragmented experience. So we think that even DeFi is going to have a moment where I can see what my graph is doing. And hey, let's do a liquidity pool together. So we think that social will make a lot more things much more multiplayer.
One of the benefits of Web3 Social is the portability of content and your social graph, as you mentioned. But that kind of makes it more important to create a community or really create a moat around your product. So how do you think about that in terms of growth and community building?
Yeah, so I think obviously community is super important when building a product in Web3. And I think Web3 Social is making it even more significant because right now, if you're on Lens and you're building an app, people you have a content creator and then they decide to actually start using a different app. They take all of their followers. There is no siloing. All of the follower count goes to the new app and they can start producing completely different content. It could be from text to video. So I think all of these applications do realize that. I think some of them will sort of try and create a moat around distributing a token at some point. But I think the way we see it right now is how are these projects defensive? If there can be a new project that's better funded and just delivers a better experience, but in a very similar niche, is actually a lot of these projects are probably going to be sort of subscription based. So I think each of, for example, these mobile apps is going to work on a specific subset of functions and catering to a specific niche and start actually sort of getting a subscription fee for using these features. So a good example could be a project that focuses on content creators. It gives you the best analytics out there. It helps you understand your revenues and also easily distribute your content.
Any final questions, Gunjan? We could wrap up here.
I think just a fun question. So Jakub, I noticed that you're the number 2 collector on sound for the month of May. So how's that been in the music space? We're super keen to hear your insights there.
Yeah, music. It's a tricky one. I love it, but why am I collector number 1? First, it's a joint effort by me and a couple of friends. This is basically a very big bet on the rise of music with AI voices. So the way I have become, because I was the person, why do I hold all of these NFTs is because I acquired previous tracks from Angel Baby. I managed to get a significant discount than what they would have to pay. So we decided to pull capital together and make a large bet there. And the reason why we've done it is we think this is a very historical moment because this is the first successful way of attributing part of the revenue to an AI voice. So it's an Angel Baby and Grimes song. Obviously Grimes it's her AI voice. And there was a song before that, but it hasn't been out. And it's the first sort of high profile successful moment where an AI voice gets attributed part of the revenue. And we think that this is historically significant. This is just something incredible. Right now, AI music kind of slowed down, but we think that in the future, this is going to be a huge field. Artists should be platforms, allowing others to also use them, just be able to get a cut of that. And that's where I think the intersection of AI and crypto works is, there's an on-chain proof that the Grimes' AI voice has been used appropriately and she has received the requested revenue share.
Very, very cool. Gonna have to take a look at that.
Okay, Jakub, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your insights, everything from, your journey into DAOs to building out the Symmetrical, all the different strategies you employ there, content creation, and then of course Web3 Social and unveiling your new initiative. So such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
And